Hello everyone and welcome to Adam Shah Weekly. A couple of months ago, I talked about building a core data app using SwiftUI, and I covered the required CRUD operation, which was create, read, update, and delete. In that particular video, and I will link to that video also, we covered really kind of like a basic stuff. We didn't really use MVVM or any other architecture. We simply were learning how quickly we can go ahead and use SwiftUI with core data by writing all of our code in our views, which is fine if you're learning, but if you're building a little bit bigger application, medium to even like large size application, usually it's a good idea to consider some sort of a design pattern. And one of those design patterns when you are implementing SwiftUI applications is MVVM. And in this video, I'm going to cover that how you can create MVVM application using core data to create the same exact app. So you can see that we are starting from the very beginning. You have the core data MVVM project, which is a SwiftUI project. Right now, we don't even have core data stuff. It's not initialized. Nothing is going on. So the first thing I'm going to do is going to go ahead and add a new file. Swift file is perfectly fine. And we will call it Core Data Manager. Core Data Manager will be responsible for initializing core data for us. So we'll go ahead and import core data right there. Core data. Perfect. Okay. So in the Core Data Manager, since we are using iOS 14, which is above iOS 10, we can go ahead and create persistent. It's something it's called persistent, and I guess it's going to appear a persistent container, which is of type NS persistent container. And NS persistent container is actually going to allow us to create or to initialize easily core data. Now, since this is a let property, we should also have a init, and inside the init, we can go ahead and initialize persistent container by the name of the actual model. Currently, we don't really have the model, so I'm going to go ahead and simply say task model or task app model, whatever you want to call it. Let's go ahead and add that model. New file. And the model is right there, the data model for core data. This model will contain all of our entities. So I'm just going to go ahead and say, to do app model, kind of like a very parent kind of a name for the whole app, to do app model. And there it is, to do app model. It doesn't really have any entities or anything right now. We will go ahead and add that later on. But let me go ahead and jump into our core data model and call this to do app model. And now I can go ahead and call. So now that we have created the persistent container, I'm going to go ahead and call persistent container dot load persistent stores, and we're going to get the description. This time we don't really care about the description because, well, that's the only store that we have, and we'll also get the error. If there is an error, so we can do something like this, then, well, this means that you were not able to initialize the core data stack, and there is not much that you can do. So what should we do at this point? Well, we can go ahead and perform an error saying unable to initialize core data stack, and we can even go ahead and inject the error right there so that a person will know what actually happened. All right. Now, Core Data Manager, what we want to do is only create one single instance of Core Data Manager. So this means that we are going to limit creating multiple instances. So we're going to create a singleton for Core Data Manager, and we can go ahead and create a shared property. So shared, let's say static let shared, and that shared property will be an instance of the Core Data Manager. So this means that whenever we want to access the Core Data Manager or any of the functionality of the Core Data Manager, we will always have to use the shared property, which will construct an instance using this function. But this particular constructor, since it is marked with private, it is not available to the outside world. So this is our core data manager. That's great. I think the next step for us would be to create some sort of a interface that will allow us to add a to-do list item. Before we go to the interface, I'm going to go ahead and create a new group. And since we're using the MVVM Design Pattern, I'm going to use view model folder. Inside the view model, I'm going to go ahead and add a new Swift file, and we will call it task list view model, which will also allow us to add a new task. There we go. Class task list view model. We will go ahead and say observable object if we want to need it. We'll see if we want to need it or not. The only thing we are interested in is the title of the task. I'm just going to go ahead and say title. So that means we can set the title of the task. And we will have a new function called save, which is going to allow us to save the task. Now we can go ahead and create this instance, which is our view model. Inside our view, state object private var, and I will call it task list view model equals to an instance of task list view model. And now I can go ahead and construct some sort of an interface. So I'm going to go ahead and say vstack for vertical stack, and with a text field, I'm going to go ahead and say enter task name. And in the binding, we can go ahead and say task list view model dot title. This means that every time we're going to write something in the text box, it is going to automatically update our title property in the task list view model. I'm going to also go ahead and, although we don't really need a navigation bar or anything like that over here, let's go ahead and make sure that we are adding a bit of a padding so it doesn't look that weird. And we can also add a text field style by calling it the rounded text field style. I thought there was a rounded text box style. Let's go ahead and see if I'm using the correct one. Text field style and rounded fodder text, this one. There we go. And we want it to be a little bit on the top, so I'm going to go ahead and say spacer, but you can see right there on the top, that's fine. I can also go ahead and put this into a horizontal stack and add a button just to the side instead of the bottom. There we go. Great, looking fine now. It's pretty simple. And after that, I can go ahead and add a list. Now, right now, I'm creating a list, so I'm just going to go ahead and hard-code some stuff. So I'm going to just say that this list is, eventually, this list is going to display the list of items, but we don't really have any list of items, so I like to start with simply adding something over here, all right? So that something is simply the index. So let's go ahead and display it. There we go. Obviously, these are not our task items. Eventually, we will be able to display the task item, but right now it is fine. So now the question is, once we click on the save button, what should happen? We should call task list view model.save, which is our function in the task list view model right over here. The task list view model doesn't really do anything. We should probably get access to the title, which we already have. But looking at over here, we don't even have any entities to begin with. So let's go ahead and add an entity. I will call this entity a task because that's what we're adding. And this will only have one attribute. Title is fine. It will be string. And it will be required because that's the only thing we're adding. So we're just going to make sure that it is required. Let's go ahead and build it. Great. Now going back to our task list view model, the title should already be populated because we have binded it right over here. So that should already be there. Using the title, we can construct a task object. So let's say task equals to task. And you can see that right now it's not even coming off as a task object. You can see that's not even recognized. Sometimes you do have to, sometimes you have to import, I guess, core data, but sometimes you also have to, you can see it's not coming up. So what I have to do is probably go ahead and restart my app Xcode again, and maybe it will pick it up. All right, so now I have restarted my Xcode after quitting, and now I should be able to see the task. Okay, so let's construct a task. You can see that this task object is coming from the core data entities, and in order to create this, I need a manage object context, which I should be able to get from core data.shared. Well, in this case, core data manager.shared persistent container.view context. So we have to write a long line of code. Possibly we can actually go ahead and minimize this. So let's go to the core data manager and call this view context, which is ns manage object context. And this is simply going to return us the persistent container.view context. So we don't have to write that long now. A little bit, we can just remove this part. So this is going to give us the task object, and that task object, we can set the title to the title that the person has actually typed in. And after this, we can use the core data manager to save it. So I can go ahead and call core data manager.shared.save task, which by the way doesn't exist, or we can simply just call save because it's going to be common for every single entity anyways. So let's go back to our core data manager, save, and all the save is doing is that getting access to the view context and calling save on it. This function can actually throw an exception, so we will have to make sure that we are putting it inside a do catch. And if there is any exception, we're going to catch it. And we can say view context.rollback. So roll back the changes, don't do anything. And after that, it is completely kind of up to you. I mean, if you want to go ahead and print out the error, we can go ahead and print out the error by saying error.localizeDescription, and you can print it out. But if everything is fine, then you should be able to save the actual task. Let's go back over here. So after saving the task, which is right here, we can do something else. Perhaps you want to fetch all the tasks. We can do that also. So we have to write a separate function which will be responsible for fetching the task. Let's go ahead and call core data manager.share.save so that we know that it is saving. Going to the content view, let's go ahead and refresh it. You can see right there we are calling the save function. And the next thing that we want to do is to retrieve all the different tasks. So let's go back to our task view model. And over here, we're going to say function get all tasks. And we can say core data manager.shared.get all tasks, which you and I both know this does not really exist. So we have to go ahead and implement a function called get all tasks. Let's go to core data manager, function get all tasks, which is going to hopefully somehow going to return an array of tasks. Now in the task object or the entity, there is a function called fetch request, which is going to return your request. And that is something that can be used to perform the fetch request. So if I go ahead and let's see what's going on over here. Let's go ahead and say over here, tell it that it is a fetch request, which is of type task. Just giving it a little bit more idea. And now we should be able to use view context dot perform, not perform, I guess. Fetch, there we go, not perform, but fetch, passing in the request. And a couple of different things. The view context can actually throw an exception. So make sure that you are calling it inside do and catch block. There we go. And we can also return it. In the catch, we can simply go ahead and print out the exception, whatever the exception actually took place. Well, the catch actually must return something. So in this case, I guess we can return an empty array. So we didn't really find anything. I think we are returning now in this case. There we go. Now let's go back to the task view model. We are getting all the tasks. These are the task model object. And in order to display something on the screen, it's usually a good idea to use the power of view models. So I'm going to go ahead and create a task view model, which is going to take in a task, and it will expose some properties so that it can be displayed on the screen. So right now, I'm going to go ahead and take the property, probably go ahead and say title. And we're going to go ahead and display task.title, and or it will be empty string. I think another property we can possibly do is an ID property, and I believe it is the object ID or core data manage object ID. Let's see if we have the manage ID over here. Let's see over here. Do we have a manage object ID? This one. And that will be task dot object ID, believe. Yeah. So we can return that also. Now get all tasks is going to return you an array of tasks, but we want to construct an array of task view model. And once we publish, or once we have array of task view model, we can put it in task array, which is an array of task view model, which I can initialize to be empty string, and mark this with published. And the way that you will convert it is you will map over it, and you will simply say task view model.init, which means that for every single item, which is a task, you are going to construct a task view model or pass it to task view model, and then we will go ahead and assign it to tasks. Perfect. And now it's time to actually display it. So let's go over here and try to construct this part. So this will be task list view model dot task, which is an array of task view model. And I don't know if we can say self over here. I may have to say ID, because I think that's what we're exposing. And then the task over here, which will be every single item in the task array. And I don't think I need that stuff. I can simply say task.title. Perfect. Let's go ahead and run this and see if that allows us to add a task or not. It's running for the first time. And I'm not sure if we need that, but here we go. So task, let's say wash the car. First thing you will see is that we did not display anything over here, because I believe that after adding, what you want to do over here after saving it is task view model dot get all tasks. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, but still it doesn't display right now. Okay, that's fine. Let's go ahead and say mow the lawn. And there we go. Feed the rabbit. There we go. Now the reason that it doesn't display these tasks when you actually load it is because we don't have an on appear over here. So let's go ahead and add on appear and call task list view model dot get all tasks. There we go. Perfect. Now the next task for us is to delete a task. All right, so now let's go ahead and move to delete functionality. If I go ahead and run the app, you can see it is displaying us wash the car, mow the lawn, feed the rabbit, all the task lists. So we are able to do the read part, and we can go ahead and do the add part. If I say do the grocery, there we go. Perfect. Now, so how do I delete? Well, I want to delete when I swipe the row from right to left, and I should see the delete button. In order to do that, I can go ahead and use a for each loop to do this thing. All right. So let's go ahead and see that how we can use a for each loop. If I'm having a list, I can go ahead and say for each, and I can pass in some sort of a list, task, which in this case is task, and the ID. So that part kind of remains the same, the displaying part of it. We'll get access to the task, and we can go ahead and display a task. So task.title. If I run this, I should get a similar result. But with for each, we can also get access to the delete by saying on delete, and we can perform an action. So on delete, and we're going to perform an action over here. So I'm just going to say delete, perform, and then I will simply say delete task. The delete task over here will be a function that I will implement. I can implement it over here also, but just to keep it a little bit clear, I'm going to go ahead and implement it over here. Delete task at offsets, which is index set. So that's the signature you need in order to comply with the on delete. Now, when we are performing the delete, which is we are doing it over here, we need to go ahead and go through the offsets dot. We can go use the for each, I believe. We will get some sort of an offset. Using the offset, which basically is just a number in the end, offset dot, let's say if it has a value or something, we should be able to get, let's just call it index, I guess. Okay, so we are going through this, all of this stuff, and we should be able to grab the item. So let's say task equals to task, which is an array, which is task list dot task, and then passing in the index. So this is going to give us the task that you actually do want to delete. You can pass the whole task to the core data manager to delete the task, or I can simply say task VM something dot delete the task and passing in the task that I want to delete. We don't really have any delete function in our task list view model. So I'm going to go over here and check out that if we can create a function. We will call it delete, and you're going to pass in a task that you want to delete. Okay, let's see why the build is failing. We are passing in the, we have a, not a, okay, hold on a second. Let me actually do this. There we go. This is task view model, not a task. The UI does not have access to the task entity. It only knows about the view models. This view model does have a property called ID, which can be used to delete a particular task. One of the issues that you will find over here is that we have the task, but we don't know what object we have. We need to use the task ID to get the task object, and then perhaps we can call a delete on it. But right now we only have the task view model, and we don't have the actual object, like the entity that we want to delete. So I'm going to go to the core data manager, and I'm going to go ahead and say over here, get task by ID, where you can pass in the ID, which will be of type manage object ID, and eventually it will somehow return you the task object. This is also going to confirm that you have a task object that you're trying to delete. All right. Now, there might be different ways. We can do view context dot, and I believe there is something called object with ID, or let's see, existing object with ID. There we go. We can pass in the ID. And looking at the signature of view context dot existing object, which is this one, you can see that it is going to return you a NS manage object. All right. So if I go ahead and simply go ahead and say, okay, go ahead and return whatever you're returning over here, it's not going to work like that. If I go ahead and convert it to a task like this, it's not going to work like that either. All right. So we need to find a way to make sure that we are able to do this thing. The other thing is you need to have a try catch block over here. So I'm going to say try. And if I'm using try, I need to wrap this in like this. Catch, well, in catch, what can we return? We can perhaps change this and return nil over here. Or you can even throw an exception saying that, well, we don't really know. I mean, what are we supposed to return in this case? All right. So let's see that how we can perform existing object, and that returns us the manage object. So how can we convert it into a task to return this? So let's go ahead and do that. There we go. And we can convert it to task. Perfect. This means that the get task by ID function can be used if you're looking for a task using their ID. Let's go back to our task list view model. So when we are deleting the task, which is right there, the first thing is to actually make sure that the task exists. So I'm going to go ahead and say existing task equals to, and I can pass in the task ID into the core data manager. So core data manager dot shared dot get task by ID, the function that we just implemented, and I can go ahead and pass in the ID. This is going to give me the existing task. And on the existing task, you can see that it's different things available over here, like it's deleted and all that stuff, right? So now the question is, okay, if we even got the existing task, how do we delete it? Once we have the existing task, we can go to our core data manager and create a function called delete task, which is going to take in a task object, and it's just going to delete it. All right. So we can go ahead and say view context dot delete and the object task. But just by deleting it, it's not really going to work. You do have to make sure that your view context is actually saved. And we already have the save function, which we can fire just to make sure that it is actually saving. So let's go ahead and call the save function over here. There we go. So this means that go ahead and save the contents of the view context, which will actually save your view context and everything in it, which means that it will delete the task. Let's go over here, and now we can go ahead and call core data manager dot shared dot delete task, passing in the task. Oh, sorry, existing task. There we go. And I guess this is going to return us. So let's go ahead and say existing task. Let's go ahead and unwrap it. I'm just going to use if let existing task equals to existing task. And now we can hopefully call existing task right there because it is unwrapped. Now let's go back to our content view and make sure that we are calling this function. There we go. Once again, after you call the function, it will be a good idea to refresh the list. So I can go ahead and say get all tasks, which is going to refresh the list hopefully and show us the updated list with that particular task being removed. So we have a couple of tasks. Let's say that I'm done with mowing the lawn. I can go ahead and swipe it and I can delete it. Let's go ahead and run the application again just to make sure that that particular task is gone. And you can see it's gone. Mow the lawn is gone. Feed the rabbit. Do the grocery. Gone. Let's go ahead and add some tasks. Let's say file for tax. I think the tax date is now extended, but there we go. Do or go to gym. There we go. So we can add all of these tasks on, delete the task and all that stuff. So now you have learned that how you can use the MVVM design pattern when you are working with a SwiftUI app for core data. And I hope you have enjoyed this. So that's pretty much it. Hope you have really enjoyed it. Now, if you want to learn more about core data, then check out my brand new course, Core Data in iOS. It covers MVVM, SwiftUI, as well as CloudKit. It was just released a couple of days ago, and you can see I have close to 230 students, and it is already a bestseller. Right there, you can see. And it covers a lot of stuff. It's an 8.5-hour course, and you can see it goes through a lot of different things related to core data, even refactoring the application, creating base classes, relationships, and also CloudKit. So definitely check out this course. The link to this course will be right there in the description of YouTube. I've also added another thing, which is for my bigger fans, I guess. Buy me a coffee. So you can see the URL right there. If you are interested in buying me a coffee to show your support, then this link will also be there right there in the description, and you can just donate any amount for me to buy a cup of coffee. I actually like to drink coffee, and that will be great. I mean, that will definitely show your encouragement, show your appreciation. So check out that link, ko-fi.com/AzamSharp, for buying me a hot cup of great coffee. Thank you so much, and hope you have enjoyed this video.